Summer is the season for entertaining. Long sunny days and warm breezy nights bring thoughts of al fresco lunches, twilight cocktails, and lingering gatherings with family and friends. But entertaining can also be competitive and, yes, stressful. How do you make sure the food you serve is au courant and not old hat? Can your table setting compete with the many beauties that flood Instagram? Have your favorite flowers possibly gone out of fashion and need to be banished? Is it even possible to actually enjoy throwing a party? I have with me today 3 renowned pros, all party planners extraordinaire, to talk about what's new in summer entertaining, what's timeless, what's worth focusing on, and what you should never have to worry about, whether you're planning an intimate dinner for 4, a poolside brunch, or an all-out flower-bedecked bash for 300. First up is LA-based caterer and event planner Lulu Powers. Dubbed the entertainologist, she is an innovative chef who oversees every detail of entertaining, from food to decor to flowers to table settings, delighting her many A-list celebrity clients. In 2010, HarperCollins published her best-selling book, Lulu Powers, Food to Flowers, and she's also written a column on entertaining for House Beautiful and contributed to numerous other publications. Hello, Lulu.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
With these other world-renowned entertainologists.
Well, we're making you even more world-renowned. Bronson van Wyck grew up in a small town in Arkansas, but you'd never know it. After serving as a diplomatic aide to Pamela Harriman in Paris, he founded Van Wyck and Van Wyck in 1999. The event firm has since become known for devising over-the-top celebrations ranging from debutante balls inspired by The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland to underground birthday parties to festive galas for the Whitney Museum and the Friends of the High Line, where he's a trustee. His book, Born to Party, Forced to Work, 21st Century Hospitality, was published by Phaidon. Welcome, Bronson.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to be here.
For more than 2 decades, Charleston-based Tara Guerard has created impeccably executed events infused with Southern hospitality. Her firm, Soirée, conceives and oversees every detail for weddings and gatherings across the country. Her work has been featured in Food and Wine, In Style, Southern Living, and Traditional Home, and she was named a top wedding planner by Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. She's also found time to write 2 books, Southern Weddings, New Looks from the Old South, and Weddings by Tara Guerard, both published by Gibbs Smith. Hello, Tara.
Hello.
So I want to start with like a big topic and get your take from each of you. And Lulu, why don't we start with you? Basically, do you think that entertaining was changed by the pandemic? We know there was a lot of pent-up demand for events after 2 years where we could barely leave the house. But has the way people want to entertain changed? What do you think, Lulu?
I think that the people who didn't entertain that much before started entertaining because they weren't like going out and they weren't invited to people's houses. I have 2 friends that would never have you over because they're like, oh, I just think I'm so nervous. I can't have people over. But during the pandemic, they were in a bundle with their neighbors and they had people over, and it like imperfect is perfect. No one was judging them because they were just glad to go next door.
That's great. They got confident. They got some confidence.
They got confidence instilled in them. And then, everything's on Instagram. You can read anything. So I think a lot of people became Instagram users, looking up everything. What's the best lasagna? What are the best appetizers? And I think everyone wanted to make it fun and yummy and pretty during the pandemic because you didn't really have anything else to turn to except the internet and your neighbors or whoever you were with.
And you didn't have anything else to do. So you could devote more time to it.
You didn't have anything else to do. Right. Exactly.
All right. Bronson, have you found the same?
Well, yeah, I have. But, in addition to the internet, you could turn to Lulu's book and Tara's book and my book. We had lots of good tips. And you know what? I think that the pandemic drove hospitality and drove social life outside, out of doors, right? So we were always trying to sort of get outside because that was a way that you could see your friends, hang out, be in a larger group, and still be in compliance with whatever health guidelines were in place at the time. So going outside is obviously easier in the summer than it is in the winter most places. But certainly where I live on the East Coast. But going outside poses its own challenges, and it goes really far back in kind of what the very basis of hospitality is, and that is sort of welcoming and taking care of your guests when they come into your care. I mean, I think the best sort of feeling that somebody can have as a guest and as a host, I think the thing that you can kind of strive for is imagine this sort of return to the womb where somebody is taking care of every single one of your needs. And when you're outside, they kind of have to think about, if it's raining, you got to figure out a way to keep them dry. If it's hot, you've got to figure out a way to keep them cool. If they're mosquitoes, you've got to figure out a way to deal with that. And so, the physical part of it when you're outside becomes so important. And I think once you do those things, then you think about the spiritual part of hospitality, which is you're basically giving love. You make people feel good. You make them feel welcome. You give them a smile. You give them a hug. And I mean physically, literally, and metaphorically. And once you get those things, you get them physically comfortable and you get them emotionally comfortable and satisfied. All the rest is just semantics. I mean, all the rest is just tablecloths and flatware and vases and whatever. So those are the most important things. And I think that the pandemic really made us focus on those things.
And I think that's true. I think that's great. I always say the ultimate compliment you can pay someone is to invite them into your home. And I feel, and I don't care if they invite me in and then we order in a pizza. That's fine.
Right.
It's like, that's all great. But at the same time, and Tara, you can speak to this because the wedding business, which of course was sort of basically decimated during the pandemic, but it seems like it's become a bigger business than ever, and people want more elaborate. And yeah, I agree with you, Bronson. The table setting's ultimately not that important, but obviously it is important because people are putting them on Instagram all the time. They're very proud of what they do. They're collecting more dishes. So I agree. Anything simple, I'm perfectly happy, but there is a sort of pressure. So Tara, what do you...
Tara, please, but I want to say semantics do matter.
Right. But the impulse is there. I think the impulse is great that people want to see other people, see their friends, see their family, But, it's like...
Yeah. I do. I think that since the pandemic, people just want to entertain more and party more because now you felt like you were in a position where you were told that you couldn't eat and drink together. And that's ultimately, to me, what entertaining is about, eating and drinking in a big dinner party. And if that's over pizza or over a 7-course tasting menu, have it. Either way, that's what everybody wants to do. And everyone wants to be at home. You can YouTube how to do anything today. So that makes it easy. Instagram makes it easy. And I think it's gone back to the basics where everyone wants just to be together and entertaining, and they're scared to lose that opportunity again. So therefore, I think weddings are bigger, more people, invite everybody. And now everybody wants to come because what if we go and have a second pandemic of some sort where you can't party or drink and dine together? So yeah, I think that everyone we're social human beings, and that's the most important thing to everybody in the world as human beings. And that's the most social, ultimate, most fun way to be social is entertaining.
Right.
So yes, if that made sense, I was going in a circle.
Totally makes sense. Totally made sense.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here because I basically agree with all of what you're saying. The important thing is to get together. But, okay, Lulu, I want to ask you, food. Now, people now, when you invite someone for dinner, are there dietary restrictions? People are vegan. People don't eat wheat. So how do you handle that? Is that becoming an ever bigger problem?
No, but if I'm entertaining at my house, I always say, if anybody has any health restrictions, please let me know.
So that's kind of a standard thing.
The one thing that does bug me is when someone comes to us, they're like, oh, I'm gluten-free. Do you have this, do that? I'm like, seriously? You couldn't have texted me that? But
I agree.
I always have stuff on hand, but it is a little annoying.
Right, you can have both. Bronson, what about for your events? I've been surprised. I've been to a couple of gala dinners in the past year where they actually served veal chops or lamb chops, and a lot of people don't eat that. So is that something that you discuss with your clients? I was sort of surprised.
Well, sure. Of course, ultimately they're picking the menu. I think that it's really important, particularly for a big thing. You've got a silent option that may not be on the menu and may not be what the waiter announces to the table. But if somebody says, I'm vegan, you've got something in the kitchen for them. I think that's being a good host. I think that when somebody comes to your house, I try to put together a meal that has some stuff that basically anybody could eat. But I 100% agree with Lulu. It's on the guest. If somebody's coming to my house for dinner and it's 10, having 10 people over, and I'm going to take time to prepare a meal for them, I expect to hear from my guest if they've got some kind of health, and I don't mind hearing from them.
Right.
But I don't want to. I don't want to know when the food's coming to the table that somebody doesn't eat. It's
right.
Just not that
I agree
relevant.
with you.
It's not relevant at that moment to anybody.
It's a little
except the person
difficult.
telling you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Tara, how about you? I know you have an office in New York as well, but you're basically based in Charleston. You're a lot of your work is based on Southern tradition. Do you find that the menus are changing, that what people want are different?
I don't think that they're changing. I would say there are definitely traditional foods that everyone always wants to have, and everyone's scared to go out of the box and do a veal chop or a lamb chop in most of my situations. But people are wanting to do something different than a tenderloin, and they do want something interesting. They don't want it to feel like a conference from 1980, and we're not going to do a surf and turf, for God's sakes. I'm not going to allow that. And but the difference to me that's changed since I started Soiree almost 28 years ago is that back in the day we would maybe have 3 vegetarians. Now our dietary restrictions for our guest list is 50% about no dairy, no wheat. It is, the list goes on and on and on. And back in the day, we may have had 3 vegetarians over the years. So I do think in the catering world for us, that has become a really hard thing because we're in the middle of a field in a tent with 400 people and half of them nobody eats anything anymore. So it becomes a little annoying.
I can't tell you how many veal chops I saw at the end of that meal being tossed aside. It was like
that's terrible.
Tragedy.
Veal chop rocks.
Right, I know.
I agree.
Well, you're talking to someone who eats
I ate all of mine, but there's,
I think
lot
it's
of people.
probably, Bronson, Lulu, and I, there's probably nothing you could put in front of us that we wouldn't eat because we're food people.
Yeah, we're foodies.
So we love food, and I eat everything. So it's hard to negotiate that a lot of times with our clients.
You said something about, Michael, you said something like, I don't know what it was, like looking old school, or you get the same plate of.
Right.
It's all in the presentation. If you have a creative chef or creative party planners and they say, hey, let's get flowers, let's put these in little vessels, and then you can put the salad around, whatever it is. If you're creative, I'm sure the food is going to taste good. Make it look pretty too.
Right.
Because they're also paying a lot of money for all this stuff.
Right.
It's not just slurping it on a plate. You want it to be beautiful.
That's so important. And I think that it's really, you can think about functional things at an event. And if you can make those things beautiful.
Right.
So the things you have to have a bar, you have to have food, if you can make those things part of the look, you're sort of halfway there. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and you don't have to do so much in terms of decoration. And I think, summertime, which, we're starting right now, it really lends itself to sort of mix of informality and formality, high and low. And a lot of times you end up eating outside, you end up serving things family style. And so the food on the table is the decoration in a way. I mean, you might add something, herbs or candles or maybe some citronella to keep the bugs away. But I think that the food presentation then becomes kind of essential. And the other thing I think that you end up sort of with your menu, choosing things that you can serve room temperature. Because a lot of times with summer entertaining, I mean, you're at home, you don't want to be in the kitchen the entire time that your guests are there. And I mean, this is the first duty of a host, is to be present, right? And people are coming to see you as a host or hostess. And if you're slaving away in the kitchen the whole time, or you're behind the bar the whole time, or you're doing the DJ, changing songs the whole time, they're not getting to spend time with you. So you pick a menu that you can serve room temperature, and then you're guaranteeing you're going to get to hang out with your guests while they're there. Make it beautiful, and you're guaranteeing that you're starting from third base.
Right.
And then also just being a chef, in what he just said about just the presentation and having it room temperature, there's so many things, salads like farro salad, so many things you can actually do the day before. And so all you have to do the day of is make it look beautiful on the platters.
Yeah, because I think there's nothing wrong with chicken or salmon, which are the standard things, as long as you have an interesting sauce, an interesting presentation, side dishes, all of that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with playing it safe as long as you zhuzh it a little, and give it a little presentation. Tara, what about your parties and the weddings that you do? Has the decor of the arena become more important? I mean, we've gone through, because we go through fashions in that, let's face it. I remember 20 years ago, probably 30 years ago now, I don't want to age myself, but I am. It was everything was white plates, white things, and then maybe you'd have a flat of wheatgrass going down the center of the table. Very minimal, you remember Bronson, right?
Neutral.
Oh, you've seen photos anyway. And then of course we got into very elaborate plates, very elaborate flower arrangements. So what are your clients asking for now? How are you directing them so that they will have something fresh and different?
Well, I think that, yes, that you're right. The old style, it was more simple, neutrals, white plates. But now today, just because we're lucky that rental companies have expanded their collections and availability. So if we could still do a seated dinner for $350 and have Janori plates. I mean, we weren't able to do that even, 6 years ago, basically. At least not in my world, most places that had beautiful china. And now you can have sterling silverware for $400. All of those beautiful things have definitely become more and more popular, and I see that being in style for quite a while. I love that brides and clients are really wanting to do more colorful flowers today. It's not always just white and green. I definitely still have those very traditional folks, but I would say the tradition of lots of flowers and beautiful table settings is never going to go out of style.
I agree with you about the color. I love color. I've always used color. It makes me happy. People are scared of color. But I think actually in the last couple of years, even some of my own friends I've seen started to use a lot more color.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I wonder if the sort of, because you're 100% right about the nice plates and nice silverware. And even when you can't find, say, 300 of the same pattern, maybe you mix it up table by table. And that really feels natural, because it's like you went and raided your silver closet.
Yeah, your butler's pantry.
And
or your neighbors.
Or your neighbors,
yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what we would do at home. Of course, my neighbors when I grew up were my grandparents. They're 3 miles away. But no, we would, I think that people, because they were home, this goes, it was a little bit chicken and egg with the pandemic. People were at home. They thought about what they were eating on and what they were eating with, and they got out their wedding china. They indulged. They went. I mean, they sold more stuff online related to home, during the pandemic than at any time ever. So, Crate and Barrel, CV2, from them all the way up to San Luis. And I think that so people got used to this, or they got more comfortable with it, or they saw how beautiful it can be to eat. You can eat Kentucky Fried Chicken, and if it's on Royal Crown Derby, Black Aves China, my gosh, it just tastes better.
I did this. I just have to say that I did this thing in New York. I used to live in this great apartment, and the table sat 24 people. These people lived in London, and I was basically living in the apartment for 4 years, taking care of it. I would throw these dinner parties with all their crystal, and I would go around the corner and get McDonald's. And I'd put all the fries and all the things. But by the way, that's just the fun of it.
And I'm sure those were really fun parties, right?
Yeah.
People had a great time.
Yeah. So
I mean, now they expect more of you, Lulu. You know?
I know, but you don't have to cook to entertain. That's what I tell people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And fear is like fire. You can either let it burn you or you can cook with it. Because if someone's going to judge you, shame on them. I mean, you're just trying.
And they don't deserve to be invited back.
Yeah. Wait, I have one more thing from Bronson. So I also said to a friend of mine, she had all this beautiful china and silver, and she's like, I never use it. I'm like, well, swap out that silverware you have in your drawer right there, and why don't you use your silver from your wedding? She's like, really? Every day? I'm like, why not? When else are you using it? And I think like stuff like that is important because it's just pretty.
Totally. And the silver gets a better patina if you throw it in the dishwasher, quite frankly.
Exactly.
You know. Now, what's interesting to me is that three of you are from different regions of the country. I mean, like I was saying, Tara, you have a New York office, Lulu, you work. But do you think there's still regional differences in the way people entertain? So, Tara, you're such a Southern hospitality maven, shall we say. Do you think there's still something distinctive about the way Southerners entertain?
For sure. My best friend lives in New York, and she's a Southern girl as well, born in the country as well. And the Southerners, I think the thing that's different, that drives her crazy, for example, that I have to hear about all the time, that in New York, you just don't typically just go over to your neighbor's house and start eating and drinking. In the South, I think we do that on a daily basis. And it's more common to have friends and family over every single day for drinks. We always start with cocktails immediately, even on Monday night at 6:00. And I feel like that most people, at least her neighbors in the city, don't do that quite as often. But I do. I think Southerners have the term Southern hospitality came about because of a reason. And I think it's because we talk to everybody. I even get in trouble because I make friends with everyone on the subway when I'm in New York. And she's like, quit talking to people on the subway. And I'm like, well, why? I'm like, I want to talk to everybody. And I just think it's a Southern thing that we do, that we talk to everyone and want to be friends with everyone and have everyone over all the time. And it's more on the fly. We do it more, not just a planned dinner party on a Saturday night. It's more often, come over, I'll see you in 20 minutes at my house, and I always have the bar ready, and I always have bar nuts, and I always have snacks, and Uber Eats is a beautiful thing.
It's actually all of, as you just said right there, you always have. It's about being prepared. I have a pantry. By the way, tonight I'm having a little impromptu because I realized it's 5 years since I had my stroke. And yesterday I was like, oh my God, I'm going to celebrate this because I came a great milestone.
Yeah,
it is. So I said from 6 to 8, and I was kind of laughing in my kitchen because I'm going to do what I wrote about once in House Beautiful. I'm just doing the 3 Ps: Prosecco, potato chips, and Parmesan outside, big chunks of it. The chicest party I ever went to was in Venice during the Biennale, and I was with my mom after my dad passed away. I went on the trip with her, and my friend was there, who's an art advisor, and she said, oh, come to this party. And so we followed the steps in, just big silver bowls of potato chips, big silver bowls of Prosecco, and just the Parmesan. I mean, I'm like, this is the chicest thing. And I still obviously, I'm still talking about it all these years later.
That's cool. And of course, And of course, Lulu, you and Tara, you have, you can entertain outdoors more easily than we can in New York.
Yes.
I mean, we can entertain outdoors, maybe 6 months of the year, Bronson, 5 months of the year.
Yeah, I was just thinking what Tara said. I think that summer entertaining for people. So in New York, I think that people's apartments are, in a way, their refuge from a chaotic city. I mean, the second you step outside, there's the energy and friction of being in New York. And so I think people's homes are more of a retreat or a refuge. And so you don't really drop by without letting somebody know. But I think when summer comes around and people are out in the country or out on Long Island, it's their chance. It's New Yorkers' chance to live and entertain like Southerners. And so you do drop by in the summer. And so I guess I just was thinking about why is it that, because I'm from the South too, and we always had drop-bys going on, and we would do that, and you don't do it here. But I think it's a space thing as much as anything else.
I agree. I grew up in Connecticut, and I'm one of 6 children. And on the weekends, people always came to our house. My dad always made soups. He had bottles of wines out. He had his big copper pots. He had bowls stacked. And people knew just to stop by. So I feel like even though I'm a Yankee, I have a little bit of the Southern, my family has a little bit of the Southern, because our house was like Grand Central. And that's how I am here. People just stop by here. That's because they know I enjoy it. But I'm just saying, I think...
Right.
I think it's great.
It is hard in a city like New York or even San, if you have to go through a doorman and you're up on the 20th floor or whatever, it's hard. People don't just wander in. Yeah. So you have to make accommodations to reality. But I agree with you, Bronson. I think a lot of people then, if they have a weekend house or whatever, they use that as the opportunity to entertain. But listen, I have been fortunate to go to many dinner parties in Manhattan. And, we entertain in Manhattan, not as often as I'd like. But, I think, and as I said, I think people are always thrilled to be invited because, and I'm not as good a chef as you, Lulu, or, and I don't put on as elaborate a table as you, Bronson. But, I think people are happy to be invited. And I think that that's something that needs to be reiterated, because I do think that with the rise of social media and all the Instagram stuff that we see, everything looks so spectacular that people feel they have to live up to that or match that. I mean, I remember
in every aspect of life.
Exactly. It's not just in entertaining. It's true. You look at the body,
the vacation,
hair, right?
I mean, yes,
it's true. And it's kind of a pressure. And I remember, our dear friend Julia Reed Bronson, when she told me this great story about when she first started, and she was in Washington. She was still based in Washington then, and she decided to put on a dinner party. She invited all these people that she was meeting in politics and the media and, the DC, whatever. And she was driving herself crazy, getting ready. And she was calling her mother, who's one of the greatest hostesses ever, for advice on this, and should I make this, should I make that? And finally, her mother was so exasperated. She said, Julia, can't you just make something that tastes good? And I think that we lose sight of that, People feel that they have to maintain a certain standard or, put on the dog, as I used to say.
That's just so not what personal hospitality is about. A host is not a brand. I mean, totally. If you're launching a product, you're creating an event or an experience that really is serving a business need. You're doing it to create content, to promote something. I mean, if you're trying to promote something when you're having people over to your home, you've already started driving in the wrong direction, and you probably need a course correction before you worry about what you're going to serve. So hospitality is about giving and sharing kind of love, and the content side is leave that to the PR agency who's doing it to open a hotel or sell a car.
But at the same time, a lot of the events that you all do, and Tara, this is certainly true of the weddings and the parties that you put on in the South. people want to have a theme. They want to have a fantasy element to, especially I think the bigger the event, a lot of the galas have a fantasy event. How important is that still, do you think, in the way people are looking at entertaining these days? Tara, what do you think?
I'm not the fantasy girl. Bronson is your fantasy guy. I am.
Bronson's got the magic.
Bronson is the guy that does crazy fantasy.
My girls are out of the box.
You have these beautiful weddings and fields of flowers.
Mine are beautiful and simple.
That's a fantasy.
And elegant.
Yeah.
And
it's a good old wedding.
It's a good old, beautiful wedding, and that I like to make memories. Now, I'm all about great fun and the best party and dancing and partying, but I'm not in that fantasy element that Bronson is. He needs to be your question for fantasy. He's a fantasy guy.
You're selling yourself short, though, Tom.
Mine is a different fantasy. Let's put it that. It's just a different fantasy.
You're so nice. Here's the thing, though. In the United States of America in 2023, aren't we all looking for a fantasy? Don't we all need a fantasy to escape to in a certain way?
I mean, it depends what kind of fantasy you have. I don't know. No, but I think I'm your good old traditional girl with great food, most important, great service, and a damn good bar and good music. And so I'm a little old-fashioned that way. And when it comes to etiquette, I'm more of that Southern traditional girl that's going to stick with the etiquette of the most perfect worded invitations. I mean, my mother instilled that in me. And yes, I use my silver every day at home. And so there's a little bit of me can't get that Southern girl etiquette stuff out of me.
Why should you?
But if somebody wants flying angels with, to say call Bronson, I don't know.
But Bronson, people still want that, don't
they? Do. I'm just not good at that. But Bronson is, so I would tell him to call Bronson. And then
it's funny, flying angels. You mentioned the party in New Orleans, the Wizard of Oz. We did have flying monkeys at that party.
Well, there you go. See, I would never have flying monkeys at one of my weddings. So.
Even if they were carrying big peonies or something?
I'm boring.
You are not boring. There's nothing more beautiful than a traditional wedding, a traditional party. I mean, silver candelabra. What's more wonderful than that?
I know.
I think that's so important with an event.
For sure. Have personality, personal.
Yeah, to have the personal touch. And that if you come away from a party knowing a little bit more about the host or hostess and liking them, loving them a little bit more, then they've done a good job. And so that was very much that combined with, as you say, the sort of structure of tradition and classical etiquette and the way you lay out a room. And so, it's the architecture. Remember, the architecture of it or the tradition is in service of the experience and the feeling.
Okay. So, this has been so fascinating and interesting to me. And everybody talks about trends and what's trends. And what I get from all three of you is that the trend is just to be present and relax and enjoy your guests. And I know that doesn't sound trendy, but I think it's something that is ever true and classic. And I just think that that's going to be very reassuring to our listeners. So, but I do want to ask each of you, what is the biggest fiasco you've ever had in terms of giving a party? And what would be the one or two tips that you would give somebody who's planning not, say, a wedding, but just like a dinner party, or whether it's outdoors or indoors this summer? What would you stress to them? So Lulu, let's start with you. What was your biggest disaster?
There was a lot. But things that just didn't happen. One was, I'll never forget, bringing out this beautiful birthday cake. And right as we were about to get to the door, the person holding it just drops the whole damn thing on the floor. I'm like, and I literally said, go get spatulas. And it was like a mud pie. And then I took all the flowers that was on the dining room table. I took off the heads and I like quickly like put it around. But you got to think on your feet. You can't even get upset. You just got to go, okay, what can we do?
How do we salvage this? That's really good advice.
Another good one is this. It's one of my first jobs in LA. This lady insisted upon having these honey baked turkeys. And she's like, I'm going to get those. I'm going to have them. Or they're my husband's favorite, yada, yada. Well, she had them out on the counter because you have to like defrost them. They're already cooked, but you just warm them up with brown sugar and stuff. Someone who was working with me stuck them back in their freezer. So when it came, literally they took them, they went in the guest house, and the guy says, do I seriously have to stand in the shower? I'm like, Sarah, because we're gonna steam this. We're gonna steam this.
That's
and
hilarious.
They had to hold it in the shower. Seriously.
That's hilarious.
But it worked out.
That's great. So what would be 1 or 2 tips for this summer's entertaining to make it fun and au courant? Is there a vegetable that you like to use that people don't know about?
I'm big about going to the farmers markets and using whatever they have to take the stress off you. Don't make it, because in the summer it's so much easier to just put things out wherever anybody lives in the country, fresh food. But the worst part of entertaining for people is putting the stress on themselves. And if they can just think to themselves that they're coming to have a great time, I'm going to give them great, say, margaritas, and they're going to have a fun time. I feel people get into their heads worrying about, oh, that's not right. That really needs one more flower. It doesn't. Imperfect is perfect.
Right. Great. And Tara, what about you?
I would say for summer entertaining for me would be make really fun new drinks. I love making cocktails, and I love playing with things and making them fresh. And all my girlfriends want to stay skinny, so we don't do sugary things. And I love coming up with new concoctions that are fabulous and good and light and refreshing and taste delicious. And that's fun for me. And that's what I recommend.
Okay.
Drink more.
Okay. That's good advice. Now, confess your biggest disaster.
Well, I won't go into wedding disasters because that list would last another 3 hours.
I'm sure.
But I'll tell you one of my personal dinner party disasters. I had a little girl from my intern talked into coming over to help me at home entertain for a dinner party I was doing in my garden in Charleston. And I had this big, beautiful shrimp dish that I had made, and she covered it in, well, maybe I covered it in saran wrap to cover it to be ready for the guests while I was outside making drinks as usual. And then it's time to have dinner, and I go inside to let her know, can she help me plate or whatever? Well, she had put the entire dish with the saran wrap in the oven, and the saran wrap melted all over the entire entree that was to be served at that moment. And it was probably, I can't imagine how many pounds of shrimp. It was terrible. That was terrible. I called Fast and French down the street and ordered 10 entrees and had her go pick them up. I mean, what do you do?
What do you do?
Yeah.
So, like you said, Uber Eats. Uber Eats, it's all good.
Well, Uber Eats, all good. So anyway.
That's hilarious.
Wait, can I say one thing on that? If you keep stuff in your freezer, like pizzas that you can put fresh basil on or anything else, so if there is mistakes like that, you can always kind of be a little prepared.
Yeah, great. Okay, Bronson, your turn. Biggest disaster and a little bit of advice.
I'd say the biggest, there have been many. I mean, we try to actually never talk about them.
No names need to be revealed.
Well, we were doing this wedding down in Beaufort, South Carolina, and the clients had a tulip farm. And there was this old packing shed for tulips. And the ceremony was over. Guests were coming over from in town out to the farm. And the power blew in this, shed on a concrete pad. And so here we are out in the middle of nowhere. And so we had to figure out what to do. And we have 360 people coming to eat in an hour and a half. So the caterer was this fabulous woman from Savannah, Susan Mason. You guys probably know her.
Yeah, I met her.
Great Southern chef. We found an axe. We chopped up the tables that we were using in the kitchen as, the prep tables back there, and we built a bonfire.
Wow.
And we cooked that meal on a fire in the back of this shed. Meanwhile, we have every electrician we could lay our hands on working to set up jumper cables and a power run from the 18-wheelers that were outside that had, delivered the rentals and stuff. And so we did, by the time it was by the time it was time to serve coffee, we had the power back, and so we were able to turn the coffee makers on. But
wow. That was whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Whatever.
And I was in a tuxedo. She was in a gown with probably wearing she had an emerald the size of
with her pearls.
Yeah, her pearls.
And her wine.
And the father of the bride comes and he's like, it smells a little smoky back here. And I said, you just go worry about the dance. You go worry about dancing with your daughter, and I don't want to hear about it.
That's hilarious.
So that was a semi-disaster. I think, don't figure out a plan for bugs. Nobody wants to deal with
Yeah, good.
bugs. I mean, have off, have citronella, have whatever have a thermocell or enough of them to kind of make a zone to be outside. Don't run out of ice.
Good advice.
I think ice actually, speaking of trends, I think that flavored ice is so fabulous for the summer. And I think we're going to do that a lot this summer, where we take ice cubes and, we're making the ice and we put a little cucumber juice in it, or we put a little tangerine juice or watermelon juice. And so you're getting kind of two things out of that. One, you're getting a flavor enhancement. And the other thing you're doing is getting something very beautiful. And so, the idea of a sort of pink topaz colored ice cube that is watermelon juice in your drink, and maybe you're making some sort of watermelon spritzer, and then it's melting and kind of enhancing the flavor as it happens. And this is really good in a spicy drink. Spicy drinks to me. I was going to say that. Yeah, spicy drinks to me are great to serve when it's hot outside, because there's they actually cool you off.
Right.
So when you drink something spicy, you actually the relative kind of your perception of temperature changes, and so even if it's hot, it doesn't feel as hot. I guess because you're getting so hot on your tongue from the spicy drink. But I find spicy drinks are great. Your tolerance for spice sort of diminishes. So you might like a really spicy drink when you first start drinking it, and you're sort of you get tired of it by the second one. But I'll put cucumber juice ice cubes, and the cucumber has a naturally cooling effect on the taste. So by the end, it's not nearly as spicy as it was in the beginning. So anyway, I think the ice play with ice, and don't run out.
I have a little trick for you. I love ice cubes. I've been obsessed with ice cubes for years. And in my freezers here, in my freezer in my outdoor bar, there's round cubes. There's a thing like the Sneak Easy. That's what my bar is called. And someone sent me them. But for Bronson, for you, I got into the habit of making cubes like cucumber and basil, or with jalapenos, doing it all in the blender and making the cubes, then pouring the alcohol just on top. And when you're doing a lot of people, it starts to melt a little, and it's delicious, and it looks beautiful.
Quick.
Yeah, and it's quick.
Mm-hmm. Great tips. Well, I want to thank my wonderful guests, Lulu Powers, Tara Guerard, and Bronson van Wyck, and thank everyone for listening to the Chairish podcast.